I went up to the kitchen. I said, Samuel, you're not going to believe it. We have this unbelievable opportunity. You just got called from the White House to speak to the President of the United States. He's like, oh my gosh. And then all of a sudden, he said, when? I said, Samuel, well, we're going to go on Monday. We're going to speak on Monday, but we are going to fly home on Tuesday. And he just all of a sudden just got this look on his face. And he said, oh, Mom, tell him thank you so much for thinking about me. But I work on Tuesday and they're counting on me. So it took about 45 minutes of Tristan talking to Samuel and convincing him this was really something that a boss would be okay if you called off for. In fact, Sam's so humble, he didn't even tell his boss. He said, I'm going to be going to Washington, D.C. And they said, okay, they thought he was taking just a tourist trip. I told him, I said, I want you to know, every governor, every politician, every statesman heard that he has to get back to Donato's. He's got to get back because Donato's is counting on him.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Thanks for being with us for another episode of American Potential. You know, when you were young, did you know what you wanted to do when you were older? Are you doing it now? Or are you making plans to make that happen? You know, sometimes life throws a curveball, puts you on a different path. And for today's guest, that's exactly what happened. And she wouldn't change the path for anything. When she was pregnant with her first child, she and her husband found out their son was going to have Down syndrome and knew life was going to be a little bit different. Well, after working with him through his early years, when it was time for him to go to school, she knew what would work for him and what wouldn't. Well, through his school journey, she ended up becoming an advocate for school choice, and she wants to make sure all kids have access to a quality education that fits their needs. Now, through her work, she's become a powerful voice for families. I want to welcome Tera Myers to the podcast. Tera, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
All right. Well, listen, first of all, I'd love to hear about Samuel. Tell us about Samuel, first of all.
Well, he's got quite a right personality. He's a friend to everyone that he meets.
That's so great.
Yeah, he really is. He's an encourager.
Uh-huh.
He took an early liking to his Bible when he was just a young guy, and he is constantly writing notes to people. And just recently, he's coming up on his 30th birthday. And I sent out a post asking for people to send him birthday cards, leading up to his birthday. And he's wanted to write a thank you card to every person that sent him a birthday card.
Wow.
So he's just a really thoughtful guy.
Yeah.
So he keeps himself active and we just adore him.
Yeah. I think often times of parents who have children who have Down syndrome or a disability, being in a wheelchair or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think how dedicated those parents are. I mean, I know how tough it is to raise kids. It doesn't matter what, who the kid is. Raising kids is tough, but it's really a special dedication, I think, that parents have when they have a child with Down syndrome.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's that way for every parent.
Yeah.
Specifically, though, with Samuel, I realized early on he was going to need, just a little bit more. And I tried, taking a sideline when things got a little difficult and challenging and people weren't really on my side. And I just couldn't. I think a lot of that came with personality and myself and a little determination to win, so to speak. I carried those words of Samuel's life wasn't going to amount to anything with me for a lot of years. And so I just thought I have to do my very best to make certain that he reaches his full potential, whatever that is.
Wow.
And so, it took a lot of dedication, not just by myself and my husband, but more specifically by our entire family. And he's got two great sisters who adore him. And most recently, when we were talking about my husband's and I, wills and, life planning, it was great for us because they fought over who, if God forbid anything happened to Lou and I, who would get to take care of Samuel. And, that was my dream as a mom, is that he would, grow to his best potential.
Yeah. That is something, and I've talked to a lot of folks who have a special needs child. And that's the one thing I hear from them is that you really don't think of unless you have a child, is what happens after I'm gone. Like you have to plan for that. And that's a worry that many parents have. I'm sure that's a struggle in your mind.
Yes. Right after we had Samuel, we struggled with who was going to help us with childcare, who was going to help take care of both children. And then ultimately, it became a burden on my mind as to what would happen if I wasn't around anymore. I was the one who knew him best. And, it's always been at the forefront of my mind is what about Samuel?
Yeah. When you found out that Samuel was going to have Down syndrome, what did you and your husband think?
Well, at the time, I ran a children's facility in Florida. I didn't know anything about Down syndrome. Never imagined that I'd have a child with special needs. So we went to the library. We read 6 books. That was all that they had at the time, and they were pretty archaic. They used terms that were very antiquated, and we both responded completely different. My husband's initial response was, "Oh my gosh, we're not going to have grandchildren from this child." And my response was, "What if he doesn't have any friends?" So we immediately took a very personal approach to it, but we never questioned or wavered or even gave any consideration to that this wouldn't be our child. This immediately, in fact, when the doctor posed that question to me at 25 weeks, maybe you should terminate your pregnancy. It was amazing to me that was even a thought because that had never crossed our mind whatsoever.
Yeah. Is that what did the doctor say that stuck with you specifically?
Well, yeah. When I went in for my appointment, I was seeing a group of midwives and he was the doctor associated with them. And when I went in for my appointment to meet him at the 5th month, his response, he never even looked up from his folder. He had a folder in front of him and his response was, "What are you still doing pregnant? Why are you here?" And I couldn't believe it. Wow. It just completely was like a 2x4 hit me up beside the head.
Yeah. Yeah. And you must think back now, all these decades later, and you must just think back on that and think, man, look at the wonderful young man I have, and think back on that conversation in just an incredible light.
Well, I do. Samuel and I went to meet with the former president back in 2019 at a roundtable discussion, and I had my mom moment for that experience with the doctor. And, all eyes were on Samuel as he was speaking. And I actually copied that picture and sent it back to that doctor. Oh my gosh, you guys. Sent it back to the doctor and asked him in a note, "What did you do today?" Because I never forgot.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Well, look, I hope someday I get to meet Samuel. He sounds like an awesome dude. That's all I can say.
He is.
That's great. Well, after he was born, you started doing kind of early intervention. For people who don't know what that entails, can you let us know? Explain that.
Well, early intervention, it's a government-run program. It's funded through the Department of Education, and early I think he was about 2 months old. We met up with individuals that could work on therapies with him. Speech therapy started a little bit later, but we went and met and learned about the disability. Really, just working on every area of his of what aspects of his life he might have difficulty with. In Sam's case, he needed occupational therapy. We saw a physical therapist, and then later, like I said, the speech therapist. Met other moms and dads who also had children with the same or similar disabilities that Sam did. And we went to an early childhood center down in Florida. And then when we moved back to Ohio, we then transferred all of, the paperwork and everything that goes along with him and continued here.
So you went in, you visited the school that the school system recommended. And tell us what you thought of that school.
Well, when Sam got to be school age, I had been told all the way through early intervention, you're going to have difficulties. Make sure you pick your school properly. And, it's really difficult in the United States. You're zoned to the school that matches your address, essentially. Yeah. And so I was really excited about the district that we were moving into because they had more funding. It was a larger district. It was an urban district. And then when I got there, I was shocked because mainstreaming had become a really big buzz when Samuel was itty bitty. And that's all I heard about is, oh, you want to make sure that the school mainstreams. They include children in all the classes. But when I got to the school, our district was really touting that this was a special location for kids like Sam. There was a jungle gym in that particular kindergarten class. And I remember looking at it and thinking, this teacher is really sweet. But my son will spend all day, every day underneath that jungle gym. And he's a passive learner. So he's not going to naturally be motivated to go sit at a desk.
Right.
And then when I saw them take the children, there were a couple of children in wheelchairs. There were a couple of children with significant delays, took them to the actual classroom for mainstreaming. They were just parked in the back of the room. And I didn't see any interaction, no inclusion. And I thought, this is not going to work. I had started college thinking I was going to be an elementary teacher and then changed my major. But I knew enough to know that this was not the educational model that I really desired for my son. And that particular school was a 45-minute bus ride away from my house, where there was a neighborhood school essentially across the street. So I said, I want him to be educated with his sisters. And boy, did I not have any idea what kind of uphill battle I was up against.
Well, let's talk about that. Samuel was able to attend kind of the neighborhood school, but what issues were you running into there?
Well, I noticed that they started having meetings with me long before, and they kept talking about the school. And you really don't want to go there. And it was the administrators, before I had even met the teachers, they were kept suggesting and modifying. And when I got to the school, I was very adamant. It was very unusual for my personality because I was kind of the person that wanted to get along with everybody. But there was that piece of me that knew as a mom, I felt, my God, I got to stand up for him. I have to be the one to say what's going to help. And the administrators didn't want to make the accommodations. We got an aide, but it was an aide that wasn't trained. Then we found out the aide didn't like little boys. Well, he's a little boy. Just all kinds of challenges. We're not going to modify curriculum. And then when I said, well, let's get the curriculum, and the therapists were like, go to the director of special education and make specific requests. And when I did that, well, then we don't have enough of it. We need it in another school. And just all kinds of excuses that you could possibly come up with. And every meeting was another challenge. And that went on for 4 years.
Wow. Let me ask this question because I'm a big supporter of school choice, and we talk about that a lot here because it really focuses on the kids, right?
Yeah.
But
yes.
I often hear these people who are critics of school choice, and they have every excuse in the book why you can't do it. And one of them is, well, what about the kids whose parents won't care? What about the kids whose parents won't be like Tera and be the advocate? What about them? How do you answer that?
Well, it's a really good question, and that's used as an excuse all the time. And I have yet to find a parent, even a parent that is in horrible circumstance. I have yet to find a parent that simply doesn't care. Oftentimes there's other need for different resources to come alongside that parent. And I even found that parents came to my aid and, would inform me, hey, this is what's going on. Or parents would seek me out and we would collaborate together. So yes, that is a concern that there are sometimes parents that maybe aren't highly educated or maybe they don't have the resources, but I wasn't highly educated in the area of field that I needed to be. But there was a library. There were other parents that came alongside me. I did reading. I talked to people. I shared resources. And I found that parents are the most supportive of one another. And the public school has an incredible amount of resource, incredible amount of dollars that we are funneling as taxpayers to our public school. And if they're not using them properly, it's usually the parents that find out and can really do the most to make something different happen. Right. So I don't find that to be a good enough excuse to not give children options, because there's enough resources out there to build up those parents and to support those parents that maybe can't quite do it on their own.
Yeah. And even if there were one kid who had a parent like that, are you going to keep the other 9 or the other 12 or 15? You're not going to give them opportunity because there's one. I mean, that argument doesn't even make sense. That would be sad if their parents didn't care. As you said, you've never seen a parent who doesn't care. But I mean, That's one of the arguments that gets thrown out. And I often get frustrated by the constant, it's just excuse after excuse. Well, what about this? And then if you pull kids out of this public school, then what about the kids who are left there? Well, the public school will either get better or they'll leave too. It's very frustrating. But anyway, thanks for your thoughts on that.
Go ahead.
Well, you eventually pulled all three of your kids out of public school and you attended a virtual charter school. What were your days like with all three being virtual?
Oh my goodness. I didn't really know what I was getting into. I started with my daughter and it was a lot. It was academically high caliber, in my opinion. It was the best thing for a typical developing student. And I was encouraged by them to bring home my other children, especially my child with special needs. Sadly, it was too much for him. The caliber of curriculum and level of expectation was outside of his reach academically. And they wanted me to do some things, just check off the lessons. And I really couldn't find my footing in doing that. I said, I wanted him to, that was a learning curve on my part, but I wanted him to be able to access all of the material. But I really felt it was not presented in a manner that was going to be beneficial to him. So it was long days, 16-hour days. I was logging with three children at home. And the girls, they excelled. I mean, they truly excelled. Samuel needed a more functional curriculum. So he needed something that was standards-based, that was going to present all of the content, but in a less depth and breadth format. And by bringing him home and experiencing this firsthand, it gave me more knowledge to help more families, but also kind of made me a bit more determined to say, we really, from an educational landscape, need to do something different to make sure we're reaching all children. Being honest with you, I felt, who's going to care what I have to say? Who is going to care that this mom in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, is expecting better for her child with a disability? Well, I found out later that there were a lot of people that cared, and there were a lot of other moms out there like me. We just didn't know where to go.
Wow. Now, one of your daughters got into a private school. Tell us about how that led to you kind of making a phone call.
Well, she went on to private school. She was getting to the age where it was junior high. She wanted to play some volleyball, wanted to meet some new friends, try some different things, and it was getting very challenging for me. So yes, we took advantage of an Ed Choice scholarship here because I couldn't go back to work to be able to pay the tuition, and found out that the Ed Choice scholarship was available. It opened up a lot of doors of opportunity for her. My younger daughter was really enjoying being home. And Samuel, again, it was become the tug of war with the virtual school. So I made a phone call down to the State House and said, isn't there something for individuals like my son who need a private school or smaller school model, but there's no funding available? He's told you either go to the public school or you try something at home or that's it. And they said, there's a bill that's up for debate now. Would you be willing to come down and testify? And I said, well, I don't know what that means, but sure. So I grabbed the two children that were home and I pulled a photograph off the wall and I went on down to the State House here in Ohio. And I went before the Senate where the bill was being heard and I told my story. And I plopped that picture of our family up there and I said, this is my family and this is my son and we need your help. And I went on and shared my story. And afterwards, my children were parked out in the hallway doing their spelling words and vocabulary. Two burly senators came out with tears in their eyes and they said, thank you for giving a face to this bill. We want to help you. And that was the start of the opportunity for a scholarship to be passed here in the state of Ohio. And then after that, the bill got passed. It was vetoed twice, kept going back, and it was passed. And there was nowhere that offered that program that I envisioned for my son. So I ultimately called the private school where my daughter went. And I said, for 8 years, I have been schooling my son and I've created a model program and I've tried it out with children that are his peers and parents. And I think it could work if you could just hire somebody to run the program and you start it here with the funds that we've acquired. And they came back the next day and said, we'll do it, but we want you to run it.
Wow.
I said, oh my gosh, I'm not looking for a job. I've already been working for free for several years. And they said, no, your passion, your enthusiasm, and your ideas. We want to make this happen for other children.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that the moment in your car? Or is that a different moment where you had an interesting moment? That's a different moment.
Yeah, that was the moment in my car, actually, that led to that conversation. I was sitting on the highway after the bill was passed, and I thought, where am I going to send him? How am I going to do this?
Yeah.
And that's when I literally was trapped in traffic. And I thought, what am I going to do? And I was praying about it. And the Lord said, call the private school. And I was like, absolutely not. And I have audible conversations with God all the time. I talk my prayers out, and I was like, they don't know anything about special education. And the Lord kept saying, make the phone call. And I kept saying, I am not making this phone call. I got to try someone else. And in fact, the guy next to me was watching me, and I know he's thinking, okay, we've got a live one over here. This lady is like talking to nobody in the car. And I finally said, all right, fine, I'm going to call. And I called the school and said, could I get an appointment to talk to the superintendent about this scholarship and about an opportunity? And they said, well, we'll give you 5 minutes if you can get here before 3. And as soon as I hung up that cell phone, the traffic started moving. And it was confirmation to me that, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. God has a plan for my family.
Yeah, that's amazing. And this, by the way, what a great inspiration. We talk on this show a lot about people who have helped break barriers, but you did it for Samuel, but at the end of the day, you also did it for all the kids in Ohio who are in similar situations, right? And for the parents there. Yes. And that's what's so inspiring, really, about this story. It'd be one thing if you did it for Samuel and then you just stopped and you got what you needed, but you didn't. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is what great Americans do, right? This is what compassionate people do. They say, it worked for me. I'm going to make sure this is available for everyone else, too.
Yeah, I've been asked that question, especially last year when Ohio was trying to expand their Ed Choice programs. I was asked by several politicians. They said, why do you keep coming back? Tera, you got your bill passed back in 2012. Why are you here again? And I said, there are still children across our state and our nation that do not have education choice options. There are parents that do not have education freedom. And, it was one thing, like you said, I fought so hard for Samuel. And then at the end of the day, I said, I will continue to tell my story. I will help start this program, but it can't just be about my son. That would be the selfish thing to do. Right. It has to be about more students. We can't go to this great of an effort for one child. I mean, we could, but what a horrible use of resources. Instead, we have to open doors for all children. And that was the big question last year. And I hear it all the time. My goodness, your children have now graduated and are having, their best life. Why are you still here? And I said, because I still have breath in my lungs and there are still children out there and there are parents. I think about the single mom or the widower dad or the grandparents or maybe the aunts that are all raising children. And what if they're sitting at their desk crying like I was, wondering, what am I going to do to provide a quality education for this child? So when I think about that, I'm like, I still have opportunity to speak and to share experience and knowledge. And if one more door can get open to save a child from not having what they need, then I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Wow. What an inspiration. I mean, again, now does Samuel, does he understand all of that? Now, what does he think of you? He's probably like, Mom, you're like amazing.
He does. He's so sweet. I mean, he tells me all the time, Mom, you're my rock star. And I tease him all the time. I'm like, oh, you're my celebrity son. And we're both pretty humble, to be honest. I mean, Sam, he was more concerned about calling off from work at his job at the time than going to the White House to meet all of those people.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because you had all this work. You and Samuel had a once in a lifetime opportunity, right?
Yeah.
But because he has this strong work ethic, it almost didn't happen. Tell us that story.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, we got a call. I mean, we had many opportunities and he had spoken before a lot of different people. And he was getting quite good at public speaking. I mean, he spoke before senators and representatives and the Secretary of Education and Washington, D.C. I mean, he had been all over the place, all over Ohio. And so we got a call on a Thursday, hey, would you guys be available to come to Washington, D.C. and speak before the president and vice president and, this big lineup at a round table? And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. And they said it would be Monday. And I said, oh, thank goodness, he works on Tuesday and he's really funny about Tuesday's work. And they said, well, wait a minute. The president might have, maybe might want to talk to you again later. Book your flight out on Tuesday. And I thought, oh, dear, here we go. And so I did. I went up to the kitchen. I said, Samuel, you're not going to believe it. We have this unbelievable opportunity. You just got called from the White House to speak to the president of the United States. He's like, oh my gosh. And then all of a sudden he said, when? I said, Samuel, well, we're going to go on Monday. We're going to speak on Monday, but we are going to fly home on Tuesday. And he just all of a sudden just got this look on his face and he said, oh, Mom, tell him thank you so much for thinking about me. But I work on Tuesday and they're counting on me. And I said, Samuel, 1% of 1% of the population in the United States gets this invitation. I said, I don't like celebritize people, but this is a big deal. I said, yeah, these are important people. He goes, I know. And I'm so glad they thought of me, but my job, they're counting on me. And, Jeff, I just about lost it. I had to call my son-in-law, who I had just gained a month earlier. He just joined the family. I said, you've got to talk to him. He said, oh, heavens, no, I'll go in his place. And so it took about 45 minutes of Tristan talking to Samuel and convincing him this was really something that a boss would be okay if you called off for. In fact, Sam's so humble, he didn't even tell his boss. He said, I'm going to be going to Washington, D.C. And they said, okay, they thought he was taking just a tourist trip. Oh, they were blown away. I told him, I said, I want you to know, every governor, every politician, every statesman heard that he has to get back to Donato's. He's got to get back because Donato's is counting on him. And they were floored. They said, that is crazy. We love it. And I said, yeah, well, you didn't have to take him and explain to him and everybody else his
That is amazing. What a sweet spirited young man you have.
Yeah. If we all had that work ethic, if everyone in the nation, I mean, I kept saying to him, Sam, it's a 4-hour shift at minimum wage. And he said, and his end statement was always, they're counting on me. Yeah. And I thought, what if all of us looked at our jobs that way? They're counting on me. And we showed up to make sure. And I just, it was a proud mom moment. Each step of the way has been it's been a proud moment to go, if you put the effort in, parenting isn't a passive job. Like you said earlier, it's not for the faint of heart. It's hard. It's hard work and it's exhausting. And sometimes we just want to throw in the towel. But if you put in the work, I can tell you, I have one of a very challenging, if you looked at him on paper, you'd be like, oh, why bother? But if you look at him in person and say, we put in the work and we reinforced some character traits that are really important. And he got it. And he's a great example to all of us. He's an example to me every day. Get up, quit your complaining and get to work. They're counting on you.
Yeah.
So,
well, and how many employers would love to have an employee that has that kind of a work ethic? Like, they're counting on me. I have to be there. That's incredible. Yeah. Well, Samuel's what an inspiration. I'm telling you, I got to meet this guy.
You'll love him.
I got to do it. Yeah, I'm sure I will. So let me ask you, what advice would you give to parents that are wanting school choice for their child?
I would really encourage every parent to just take a couple minutes, take your phone out, record your story. For the longest time, I didn't call anybody and ask for help because I thought people would think I was just whining and complaining. And when I finally called down in Columbus, and that I felt so bad for Sarah, I'll never forget her, became a friend, and she's the one that answered the call that day. And I was at my wit's end. I just didn't think I could go on anymore with this fight. And I just told her my story and it was amazing. Somebody's always waiting at the other end, whether it's a caring friend from church, whether it's a neighbor, whether it's your best friend. You have a story to tell. Share it because there might be somebody out there with the resources to help you end the difficulty that you're facing. And that's what happened to me. So I tell parents when I see them, record your story. Listen to it back, fine tune your story, get the meats and potatoes out of it and share it with somebody. And if the first person doesn't seem to be interested in helping you, don't stop reaching out until you find somebody that will, because there's a lot of us out there. I'm part of a national movement now, Moms on a Mission, through American Federation for Children. And that's what we do. We listen to people's stories and find out how can we connect them. Maybe there's a resource coming out of Washington. Maybe there's a resource right in their own state. Maybe there's something right down the street. But the goal is to help connect parents because, like you said earlier, some of them don't have the resources or the knowledge to make it happen. But we're there as fellow moms and dads and sisters and aunts and brothers to make it happen.
Yeah. Wow. What an inspiration. Did he get to meet the president?
Yes, he did. He met with the president and the vice president and the secretary of education and a lot of governors. He even, this is a funny, when it was time for our roundtable to finish, the press corps was right behind Samuel and I. They were behind us. Their microphones were coming up between us and over us. And when I was trying to speak, I think it was one of my worst presentations because all the clicking of the cameras was in my ear. It was insane. And Samuel pulled it off greatly. Well, the presidential assistant that asked the press to leave, she kept asking them to leave nicely and kind of like at a football game, come on, it's time to go. And they wouldn't leave. They kept bellowing stuff. And on the third time, Sam picked up his fist and slammed it on the table and said, come on, guys, it's time to go right now. And the president said, oh, Samuel, I love it. Come on, you and me. That was great. Let's go in the Oval Office and get a photo.
Oh, so great.
Yeah. And he said, Mom, come on, you too. So we got to go in the Oval Office and I have some great photographs and Samuel got his signing pen. The president's like, take this back to your friends. They're going to love it. He was so gracious. And
wow.
It was a great experience. And Samuel wrote him later and he wrote him a personal letter back. And, it was a great opportunity, not just for Samuel, but the fact that he got to sit at that round table and represent his population for all those other children.
Yeah. This is an amazing story. How has this not been made into a movie? How has Samuel's story not been made into a movie yet?
Well, I'm writing a book. I'm working on a book, but I'm not much of a writer. And everyone has come to me every time I speak. They're like, "Where's your book?" And I said, I'm not a good writer, but I need some help. So I'm slowly getting the stories down because, it is very inspirational. I never thought it was, but when I look at the trajectory of how his life has played out, there was divine intervention and a lot of wheels in the process. And it's inspiring to parents, Yeah.
Well, here's the problem. If it was a movie, Samuel would have to play himself because it sounds like you couldn't find anyone else that would be quite as entertaining and wonderful as Samuel.
Yeah, he's something else. I'll tell you what. I mean, he has his moments. He's not the typical, he's pretty stubborn and he's not real huggy because we taught him that, I don't just walk up to anybody and give him a hug and you shouldn't either.
Yeah.
And in order to hold down a job, there's some skills you got to have. And he has 3 jobs right now. Was just offered a 4th job. And I said, he doesn't have any more days left to work. So he's busy and he would love that. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to make it my mission to see him. The next time I'm in Ohio, I'm going to arrange for that to happen.
You give us a call. We'll make it happen.
I just can't come on a Tuesday, as I understand. Is
well,
that
you
right?
can if you go to the pizza shop and get yourself some lunch. Okay. He will serve it up for you. I've actually had them come to me and say, please, no more visitors on Tuesday. We want to get our money's worth from him because for the longest time, people were just coming to get pizza just to see him.
That's great. Well, what a great story, Tera. What an inspiration. You're an inspiration. Your husband's an inspiration. I mean, your family this is just a great story. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to tell us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I think it's important to get the message out there for other families as well.
Yeah, you bet. It really is. Well, Tera's story and Samuel's story, I mean, what an inspiration. We talk about these all the time, these different stories of school choice and the empowerment that it leads to for kids and for families. And honestly, I'm not sure this story of Samuel isn't the best one we've ever told, but it speaks to the individuality of school choice and why that's so important that this be about the kids. It's about the kids and the choice of the parents who have their child's best interest at heart. It can't be about a system. It can't be about funding based on your zip code or or things like that, or formulas. This has to be about what is best for that individual child and the decision of the parents making it on behalf of those children. So thank goodness that we have people like Tera, parents like Tera, who not only are going to fight for their kids, but then want to go out and fight for other people's kids too. And for every kid in America to have that same opportunity that Samuel has to reach his full potential. Thanks for being with us. American Potential Podcast. We're always looking for stories like Samuel's and like Tera's. And if you have a story like that, we'd love for you to reach out to us and tell us about it. Go to AmericanPotential.com, fill out our Share Your Story section. We'd love to hear your story and help tell your story as well. The best way to stay connected with us is by liking and subscribing to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. Thanks for joining us for this great and inspiring story on American Potential.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.